She was standing in the freezing sleet, 280 pounds of shattered heart and drenched clothes after her husband threw her out like trash for not fitting into his perfect image. Then a black SUV pulled up, and Houston's most dangerous man whispered, "Come with me." The sleet in Houston on a late November evening doesn't just fall, it bites. It slashes sideways, driven by a brutal wind off Lake Michigan, finding every seam in your clothing. But for 32-year-old Clara Jenkins, the biting cold of the weather was nothing compared to the ice she had just been subjected to inside her own home. She stood on the wet concrete of the driveway in Oak Park, her size 24 jeans instantly soaking through plastering uncomfortably against her heavy thighs. At 280 pounds, Clara took up space in a world that constantly demanded she shrink. For the past 7 years, no one had demanded that more ruthlessly than her husband, David Rossi. "I'm not doing this anymore. Clara, look at you." David's voice cut through the howling wind, sharp and dripping with disgust. He stood in the warm yellow glow of their porch light, shielded from the rain. Beside him stood Chloe, a 24-year-old Pilates instructor, with a waist the size of Clara's thigh, looking at Clara with a sickening cocktail of pity and triumph. "David, please." Clara begged, her voice, trembling, her thick arms wrapping around her torso, in a futile attempt to shield herself from the cold. "It's our anniversary. You can't just lock me out. Where am I supposed to go?" "I don't care where you go," David sneered, tossing a cheap, hastily packed duffel bag onto the wet lawn. It hit a puddle with a dull, heavy splash. "Go to a diner. Go to a buffet. That's all you care about, anyway. I'm a regional director now, Clara. I entertain clients. I host dinners. I can't have a wife who waddles into a room and breaks the patio furniture. You disgust me. You've let yourself go, and I am done drowning with you." The words hit her with physical force. Clara felt the air leave her lungs. It was true that she was fat. She had always been a bigger woman, but the massive weight gain had crept up on her during the marriage, a direct response to David's relentless emotional abuse. Food had become her only sanctuary, the only thing that didn't criticize her or tell her she was worthless. Every time he belittled her, she found solace in the quiet comfort of the pantry. She had cooked his meals, ironed his shirts, managed the finances that kept him out of bankruptcy early in his career, and loved him with a desperate, suffocating loyalty. And this was her reward. "Chloe is moving in," David stated flatly, placing a proprietary hand on the slim woman's lower back. "I'll have my lawyer send the divorce papers to your office. Don't come back here, Clara. I've already changed the alarm codes." The heavy oak door slammed shut. The deadbolt clicked. Clara stood frozen in the sleet for a long time. The street was quiet, the houses of their affluent suburban neighborhood securely locked against the storm. She could see the silhouette of Mrs. Gable next door, peeking through her blinds, watching the spectacle. Humiliation burned hot in Clara's chest, a suffocating weight that made her want to claw out of her own skin. With numb fingers, she walked over to the soggy duffel bag. It was too heavy, her joints aching as she hauled it over her shoulder. Every step down the sidewalk was an agony of chafing skin, freezing rain, and absolute crushing despair. She was 32, morbidly obese, abandoned, and entirely alone. She trudged 3 blocks to the bus stop on Cicero Avenue. The plexiglass shelter offered minimal protection. Clara collapsed onto the metal bench, the cold biting through her soaked cotton coat. She sat there, a heavy, drenched mass of misery, crying silently into her hands, the tears mixed with the freezing rain. She thought about walking into traffic. She thought about how easy it would be to just let the cold take her. Who would care? Her parents had passed away years ago. She had isolated herself from her friends because David hadn't liked them. Her entire existence had been reduced to a punching bag for a mid-level corporate narcissist. 45 minutes passed. Not a single bus came. The streetlights flickered, casting long, lonely shadows across the slick pavement. Clara shivered violently, her teeth chattering, her thick fingers turning a dangerous shade of blue. She closed her eyes, exhausted, feeling the sheer physical and emotional gravity of her life pressing her down into the concrete. Then the low, deep purr of a heavy engine cut through the sound of the storm. Clara didn't open her eyes at first, assuming it was a snowplow or a late-night delivery truck, but the sound didn't fade. It stopped right in front of her. She blinked through her wet, mascara-streaked eyelashes. A massive, jet-black Lincoln Navigator, its windows tinted so darkly they looked like obsidian, was idling at the curb. The sleek, dangerous-looking vehicle was completely out of place in this sleepy, storm-battered suburb. For a second, terror spiked through her. She clutched her wet bag. Was she about to be mugged? What could they possibly take from her? The heavy rear door swung open. A large man in a tailored dark suit and an earpiece stepped out, holding a massive black umbrella. He didn't look at Clara. Instead, he held the umbrella over the doorframe. A second man stepped out of the SUV. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and moved with a terrifyingly quiet grace. He wore a charcoal grey bespoke overcoat that probably cost more than Clara made in a year. His dark hair was lightly dusted with silver at the temples, and his face was a study in hard, chiseled lines, a strong jaw, a sharp Roman nose, and a pair of dark, piercing eyes that missed absolutely nothing. Clara stopped breathing. She knew that face. Not personally, but professionally. She was a senior forensic accountant for Grant Thornton, downtown. 3 weeks ago, she had been auditing the books of a sprawling logistics firm called Apex Hauling. She had found a massive discrepancy, millions of dollars moving through phantom shell companies. When she brought it to her boss, he had turned pale, snatched the file from her hands, and explicitly ordered her to bury it accidentally, letting the real owner's name slip in his panic. Arton Costello. He wasn't just a businessman. He was the head of the Costello Syndicate, a ruthless, deeply entrenched mafia organization that controlled the unions, the docks, and half the illicit cash flow in Houston. He was a ghost, a myth, a man who destroyed lives with the snap of his fingers. And he was standing in front of her at a bus stop in the freezing rain. Arton Costello did not flinch as the sleet hit the edges of the umbrella held by his bodyguard. He stood perfectly still, his dark eyes locked onto Clara. He took in her soaked hair, her blue lips, her trembling, heavy frame, and the pathetic, waterlogged duffel bag at her feet. There was no pity in his gaze. Clara hated pity. Pity was what cashiers gave her when she bought too much junk food. Pity was what her co-workers gave her when David called the office to yell at her. Arton's look was analytical, piercing, and strangely respectful. He took a step forward. Clara instinctively shrank back against the frozen plexiglass, her heart hammering wildly against her ribs. "Mrs. Rossi." Arton's voice was a low, resonant baritone that carried effortlessly over the wind. It was smooth, but laced with an undeniable authority. "Or given the scene I just witnessed from the end of your street, should I call you Clara?" Clara's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her teeth chattered too violently. How long had he been watching? Why was the boss of the Houston Mafia sitting in a car on her street? Arton didn't wait for her to find her voice. He reached up, unbuttoned his heavy, incredibly soft cashmere overcoat, and slipped it off his shoulders. He stepped under the bus shelter and draped the coat around Clara's shaking broad shoulders. The fabric was heavy lined with silk and radiated his body heat. It smelled faintly of expensive cedarwood cologne and something metallic and sharp. Danger. Because of her size, standard coats rarely fit her, but Artan was a massively built man. The coat wrapped around her, instantly breaking the biting wind. I... Clara finally stammered, pulling the lapels closed with numb fingers. "What are you doing here? I don't believe in coincidences," Clara Artan said, pulling a silver cigarette case from his suit jacket. He lit a cigarette, the flare of the lighter illuminating the sharp angles of his face, and a thin, faded scar running along his jawline. "I've been having my people keep an eye on you since you flagged the anomalies in the apex hauling ledger." Clara's blood ran cold, colder than the sleet. He was here to kill her. Of course he was. She knew too much. David had thrown her out just in time for her to be murdered at a bus stop. "Please," she choked out, fresh tears welling up. "I didn't tell anyone except my boss. I deleted the files. I swear to God I won't say a word. Just let me go." Artan frowned, a deep crease appearing between his brows. He looked genuinely irritated, not at her, but at the situation. "Do I look like a thug who shoots accountants in the street? If I wanted you dead, Clara, you would have died quietly in your sleep 3 weeks ago." The bluntness of his statement made her gasp, but paradoxically, it eased her immediate panic. "Your boss is an idiot," Artan continued, taking a slow drag of his cigarette. "But you are a savant. My own financial architects spent 6 months building that laundering route. They assured me it was invisible to the IRS, the FBI, and every major auditing firm. You dismantled it in 4 days, on a Tuesday, alone." He looked down at her, his dark eyes intense. "I don't destroy assets, Clara. I acquire them. I came here tonight to make you a job offer. I needed a private off-the-books conversation. What I didn't expect was to watch a mediocre middle management nobody toss a brilliant woman into the freezing rain like a piece of garbage." Clara looked away, shame flushing her cheeks hotly. "He's right, though," she whispered, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "Look at me. I'm a mess. I'm fat. I'm useless, and I have nothing." Artan stepped closer. He didn't reach out to touch her, but his proximity was a physical weight. "I have no use for a woman's dress size," he said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerously soft. "I care about loyalty. I care about intellect. David Rossi is a fool who measures worth by the shallow standards of a world that I own. Fools don't survive long in my city." He tossed the half-smoked cigarette onto the wet pavement and crushed it beneath his leather shoe. He looked back at the idling SUV, then back down at Clara. "You have 2 choices, Clara." Artan said, his tone shifting into pure business, yet underlaid with something strangely protective. "You can sit here freeze to death and let a man who isn't worth the mud on my shoes win. Or you can get in my car." Clara stared at him. "Get in your car and go where? To a warm hotel, to a hot meal, and tomorrow to a new life, where your mind is respected, your loyalty is rewarded, and your husband learns exactly what happens when you discard something valuable that belongs to Artan Costello." Belongs to. The words sent an involuntary shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. It was a terrifying proposition. He was a criminal, a Mafia boss. Entering his world meant crossing a line she could never uncross. But as she looked down at her soaked, ruined sneakers, and then back up at the warm, dark interior of the Lincoln Navigator, she realized she had already lost the good world. The legitimate world had chewed her up, used her labor, drained her love, and left her out for the garbage collectors. Artan held out his hand. It was a large, calloused hand, wearing a heavy gold signet ring. "Come with me," he commanded softly. Clara took a deep breath, clutching the edges of his cashmere coat. Slowly, heavily, she pushed herself up from the metal bench. She ignored her duffel bag on the ground. She didn't need those wet clothes anymore. She placed her cold, trembling hand into his large, warm one. Artan's grip was firm, supportive. He didn't struggle or act burdened as he helped her steady herself on the slippery pavement. He guided her to the SUV, the large bodyguard holding the umbrella, steady over them both. As Clara climbed into the back of the Navigator, sinking into the plush, heated leather seats, she felt a profound shift in the universe. The doors closed, sealing out the howling wind, the freezing rain, and the pathetic ghost of Clara Rossi. Artan slid in beside her. He tapped the partition. "Drive Bruno," he said. "Take us to the penthouse." The SUV pulled away from the curb, smoothly leaving the dark, cold suburb behind. Clara sat in the silence, the luxurious warmth seeping into her frozen bones. Artan opened a small crystal decanter, built into the center console, and poured 2 fingers of amber liquid into a glass. He handed it to her. "Drink," he ordered gently. "It will stop the shaking." Clara took a sip. The bourbon was smooth, burning a fiery welcome trail down her throat. She looked at the man sitting beside her, the Mafia boss who had just saved her life. "Why do you really need me?" she asked, her voice steadier now. Artan looked at her, the streetlights passing outside, casting rhythmic shadows across his face. "Because someone within my own family is stealing from me, Clara. They are using the very ledgers you audited. I need an accountant who is smarter than my enemies, and someone who has absolutely no ties to my world." He paused, his dark eyes locking onto hers, lingering for a fraction of a second on her lips,